Here we go. Hey, welcome to another episode. If you don't know that awesome gentleman that's on the other side of my screen, it's Mr. Geno Quiroz from Monterey Premier. Welcome back, Geno. And then, of course, I know we had sent a message back and forth talking about mobile customization. So because it didn't record earlier, both of us have seen articles dealing with the mobile first indexing. For those who may not understand, can you give us a rundown on that? What's that mean for us, for designers and developers and just people in general that are using Divi to put together some awesome websites?
Well, Google announced last year that, and back in April, that they were going to start ranking mobile sites, and they were going to basically, in their own words, increase the effect of its mobile-friendly ranking signal. The goal being, in their own words again, help our users find even more pages that are relevant and mobile friendly. And so that was, they had been kind of alluding to this for the last couple of years. And then it was in April when they made that big announcement that they were changing their algorithm. And so basically what we're looking at now is, as of Friday, November 4th, they had announced, basically in their own words, to make our results more useful, we've begun experiments to make our index mobile first. Although our search index will continue to be a single index of websites and apps, our algorithms will eventually primarily use the mobile version of a site's content to rank pages from that site. So in other words, it's now one of the strongest factors in how they rank our sites in the search results is going to have to do with how mobile friendly we are. And there are a number of factors. Nobody knows. I don't even know if Google themselves know all their algorithms, but there's going to be a number of different factors, I'm sure. Speed, loading time. These are all things that you can actually test your site for right now. In fact, they have a mobile friendly test page option to help you kind of see what areas you need to work on and improve. But it's going to have a big impact on how you're ranked, even if somebody's searching on a desktop for a business, your type of business. How mobile friendly your website is going to determine how well you rank. So mobile has now become SEO.
Pretty much. And of course, before we figured out he was having some connection errors there, we've been discussing the AMP plugin. For those that may or may not be familiar with, that's for accelerated mobile pages. And it's kind of a cooperative project between both WordPress and Google. So I'm almost estimating and guessing that it's an essential thing that you have to have installed on your websites, which I do. I put them all of my sites, on my clients' websites. But here's the one thing I noticed. When you bring up a page in the way they present to put out the URL to see it in an AMP format, for someone who may have created a blog post, and this is where it gets kind of finicky at, but if they created a blog post using any page builder, what seems to happen is it strips everything out other than the text. And that's where I get a little kind of tweaked on that a little bit, is because it's like, okay, so someone put all this effort into designing a post that was visually, that might have presented a visual image, but because of AMP strips all those elements out, all you're left with is the text. Is there a way around that, or is there something we need to look at focusing on differently in regards to post versus pages in how AMP is translating them when they're viewed across the web?
Great question. And I think we're still in the early stages of utilizing AMP, especially with page builders like the one we discuss all the time, Divi, and the one we use all the time. I personally have not used the plugin, nor have I used AMP in general. But what I do try to do is use typical standard SEO and mobile-friendly practices on my blog posts. For example, I run a tutorial blog, and I have a number of tutorials on it. I get a number of visitors. But I've always found it easier for me to use the text editor anyways, so I don't use a lot of the page builder. And it's just easier to streamline for me. I think the pages are pretty mobile friendly that way. I don't have to do any customization. And so I can see if you have a blog post that's going to be a lot more intricate, a lot more images. One of the benefits of using Divi is the fact that you can do that. But yeah, I guess what it comes down to is it takes a little bit more work to not only put together a blog post. If you're going to use a lot of, for example, I try to put out as much content as possible. I also run another blog with several writers, and we're pushing out content. So we're not designing pages on our blog. We're putting out content, and I save the design for the rest of the site. So that's kind of been my best practice, what I do. But yeah, I think that is going to be an ongoing issue. I don't know how that's going to be addressed, but you make a good point, and so that's kind of my advice.
Yeah, because it seems to be something that's growing around the community. Of course, anybody that knows, Google sets the standards for the search world, and almost all the rest of them follow closely behind, whether it be Bing, Yahoo, whatever search engines. Pretty much whatever Google takes the lead on, the rest of more or less follow suit sooner or later. That being said, so once I seen a release of the amp, and of course, like I said, I installed it because I was like anybody else, it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to have this. But I'm not, pulling enough to be able to determine if it's making a big impact or not in how my things are indexed. And I was like, I'm almost tempted to pull it out and just let it roll because the site's responsive. I mean, I tested across a wide variety of mobile devices of various screen sizes. So I make sure it looks the same across all those, but it's like, is this really going to be enough? And should we as developers and designers and even personal blog sites or websites be focusing more on other SEO factors, like maybe whether or not you want to go to the new, was it HTTP2, or even doing the SSL certificates? Because I guess that's going to start playing a ranking factor for Google. And of course, obviously, page load times, everything else. And of course, that just brings in using maybe a good CDN to deliver up the images, or even using Photon off of Jetpack, which to me is the simplest answer if a person doesn't want to spend money merely for the image delivery from a content delivery network.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think we don't know what direction we're going to go, or where Google plans on going with AMP. And as far as I know, it's not necessarily required. It's just supposed to help those who have the bulky blogs. But again, ideally you will have a streamlined blog anyways, without the need for a plugin like AMP. But really, to me, it's like a plugin like AMP is really more like a Band-Aid or a fix-it to a problem that maybe should be resolved in your code or in your WordPress site or in your theme, or how you're building your blog out.
Exactly, because one other thing I noticed, and I'd look down the road at maybe doing some video toots and whatnot, but I had a couple of just straight blog posts utilizing the editor, took the URL from a YouTube video, dumped in there, but in that conversion of the AMP, it had actually stripped the video out. Here again, all I was left with was a text. I'm like, well, that's really not good for, if a person takes a video from YouTube or even Facebook Live or any other OEM bed video that WordPress supports, AMP strips it out. So what's the point if you can't get the focus item in there that you really want in your post for a person to be able to focus on?
Yeah, and that's not going to work. You would have to modify the plugin itself to not strip that out, and it seems to me like a lot more work than just having your site streamlined. You don't have a million pop-ups, don't have a million cookies, that kind of stuff. And again, pop-ups are going to be another issue too for ranking on Google. So we have yet to see what that's going to look like, but we've been warned.
Yeah, because I seen that as well, and I thought, okay, so that really kills my love for which one is it Monarch that does, or is it Bloom plugin for the email campaigns? It's like, absolutely love it, because you can build some amazing looking fly-ins, pop-ups, what have you. But then they're like, well, if you get these popping up on mobile sites, that's going to be a spank in the rear end, and they're going to kind of punish you for it and send you to the end of the pack.
Yeah.
But for people, if you really pay close attention to that anyways, you can disable it on the mobile devices, but still leave it active for the desktop viewers. So, I mean, that's a plus side. At least you still have it on one side of it. But for people that are looking to collect those those email addresses and other points of contact. Like, okay, what's going to be the better solution for that then? Maybe looking at doing it inline, or, designing it right into the page itself as opposed to a fly-in.
Yeah, they also talked about, I remember reading somewhere, and I'm not the official source, of course, but that it also was going to depend on how big of the pop-up was. For example, a smaller, streamlined pop-up that's easy to close won't be dinged as badly as one that takes up the full page that's harder to find the close button. In some cases, the X is the same color as the background, or, they're just so different. And the idea is to get you to, subscribe and whatnot. So obviously, how user friendly it is supposed to help, because I think there's a place for those, and then obviously it's been taken advantage of. So I like what Google wants to do with cleaning that up, because if there was some kind of consistency with mobile, then again, there's times when I think there's a good place for it, and there's not. When you get spammed with a bunch of advertising in that, it's definitely time to clean that up.
Absolutely, because we all have experienced it on mobile devices. You go to a website, and before you even get a chance to read the top section of whatever it is you went looking for, you're hit with the fly-in or pop-up. And like you said, some of the close buttons are and they vary from site to site, but they're hard to find. It's like an overlaying image you can't get rid of. And it's almost like it doesn't go away until you give that information, which I feel takes away from my being able to read what I went looking for. Look, If I want to give you my information, I'll give you my information. It's not a problem, but let me read what I came looking for first.
Yeah. I've just been frustrated on many occasions, and just decided the article's not worth testing my patience for.
Yeah, and they wonder about bounce rate. Well, I bet everybody's going to see an increase in their bounce rate if they got a lot of those. But nonetheless, if nobody's heard, hasn't seen it, of course you got to, because if anybody knows who Geno Quiroz is, the most recent plugin you came out with as far as the staff member listing, I bought it, I installed it, started using it. Props to you. That's all I'm going to say. Props to you. It's the only plugin I've bought that's close to being able to really get it detailed out, and especially from the mobile view. And that's been a point of concern for me, because I see a lot of these posts in all the groups that I'm in across Divi is about, I can't figure out how to style this for the mobile view. And like I said before, and I think we had talked about that it was potential, the way that they were tying it in with the Divi builder itself and being able to have that full customization on the mobile view. But yours has been the only one thus far that gets awfully close to that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
That's dibs to you for the work you put into that, because I was like, yes, finally. But the one thing, and help me understand this, maybe it's just something that's typical of a Divi plugin. I don't know. Every one I have purchased thus far, what is it about when you go to the mobile view of them and start changing the text font size and various elements, why does it seem the default's always set to 51?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I don't know. That's I never really paid attention to that, but I don't know.
Because when I put yours to the test and started loading up some of our staff members, I was like, oh, this looks absolutely gorgeous on the page. Now I squeezed it down to a mobile view, and I'm like, uh-oh, what happened here? Because it looked like everything was compressed on top of each other as far as all the words, as far as their titles, departments, and whatnot. I was like, let me go in here and take another look. And I think a lot of people get confused too, that they don't understand how to use not necessarily the mobile customizer view, but just look at the live view as they're changing something in various aspects to see how it's going to output. And I think, but that seems to be the biggest battle I see a lot of people struggling with. And of course, for people who maybe don't have a real deep bed of CSS knowledge or whatnot, of course, we know that you can use a mobile view in Divi Builder on, whether it be the phone view, the tablet view, what have you, and try to get a better feel for things, how they're going to look. But what can a person do to be able to inspect the CSS? Now, of course, I use the tools that pretty much come out with Firefox and use Google Chrome Web Developer, some of the tools in there. But for some, it's a little bit more simplified on the CSS. Is there something out there people can utilize to inspect it and get a better live view? I fell across one. I think it's called CSS Hero, but I think it's like $29 per site.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of encouraging people to learn how to use the inspector tools, as you mentioned. It's the best tool I know to play around with sizes and different dimensions. I mean, all you have to do is decrease the screen size a little bit, the browser window, shrink it a little bit and see what it's going to look like in that wide of a device. And then right click on the text and it brings up the font size and you just adjust that number up and down. Typically what I'll do is I'll just sit there, and I got my 2 monitors. I have more than that, but when I'm in that, all I really need is the 2, where I'm adjusting everything and then going in there and adjusting the settings or adjusting the CSS on my style sheet. Typically that's what I do, is I work in the style sheet. And but yeah, really that's the best way to do it. There's a lot of great sites out there that kind of give you a brush up on using inspector tools, whether it's Firefox or Chrome. And it's really the way to go. I encourage everybody, even if you're shy about learning CSS, just with playing with fonts and colors, it's great. You don't have to know a lot of code.
How do you, in regards to that, and I was trying to answer a question for a young lady the other day in one of the Divi groups, but how do you determine whether or not the CSS coding that you're going to manipulate and change needs to go into the general theme settings, or if you just want to put it on in the page settings itself? And what determines the difference of how that responds to what they're actually trying to change or manipulate?
Well, let me see if I understand the question. You're talking about if they got some custom CSS, whether they put it in the page settings or the general theme settings.
Correct.
Basically, I found that if you're going to put in some CSS, unless it's specific to a particular module, if it's specific to a particular module or section, then I would use the CSS sections, advanced tab CSS sections in there if you don't want it to be a site-wide type modification. If you do want it to be on multiple pages, then you want to use the general theme settings. And typically, in most cases, it is site-wide. So you go ahead and use the general theme settings or a child theme style sheet.
Okay, so something else I've seen, and someone had to help me out on one of them. There was and I can't recall the gentleman's name. You probably know who he is, Geno, that come out with the custom Divi contact plugin that provides you with some extra functionalities like the drop downs, check boxes, radio buttons, what have you. And it's really cool. It's a sweet plugin. Adds a lot of functionality to the standard Divi custom or the contact form. Problem is, here again, when you go to squeeze that thing down into mobile view, everything looks out of proportion. So how do you assist somebody in figuring out how to make that manipulate itself to display appropriately without everything squeezing up? Because I know there's a way to target at media, I believe is the way that starts in CSS. But do you have to define it line for line as far as each element within the plugin itself, like the form element, the radio buttons, what have you? Do those each have to be spelled out in the custom CSS, or can you do it as a global entity for that entire block, if you will?
No, you typically are going to modify each of the individual sections per media query, per device width. And by default, Divi comes with 3 widths: desktop, tablet, and mobile. And so those queries are basically where you're going to want to pinpoint particular, say, the message box or the phone number or this particular field. You can give an ID, a CSS class or an ID to each of those sections. So that way you're not having to figure out all the elegant themes class names. You go in there and assign your own class name to each field. And then that way it's a lot easier for you to know what code to use for that media query break. And
you've got any way putting up on the screen for folks that might be questioning, because and here again, I think that's exactly where a lot of people get at. And I know it was one of my biggest stumbling blocks in the beginning, because I was trying to ID each individual elegant themes sectors of it and changing the pitch instead of assigning a class myself and then going back in and manipulate. And I think that's the same thing that a lot of folks out there in the general listening audience suffer with as well, because I see that kind of over and over again as a repeated issue.
Now, I don't typically, my go-to contact form is Caldera forms. So I don't do a lot of customization with the default elegant themes form. If somebody needs more than a few fields, if they need drop-down menus, radio buttons, I default to Caldera forms.
Yeah, Caldera is a rockin' plugin for really putting together a nice form. And I've used Caldera a lot, and of course, have you ever played with Ninja forms at all?
I have at times, but not enough to be as quick as I am with customizing a Caldera form.
Yeah, Caldera is just really smooth in a way, especially if you're having to split areas up and make it like a 2-column layout or even a 3-column layout for that fact. I just like the way they allow you to split that up. It's a quick build out, and it's really not hard to customize.
Yeah, it's drag and drop, user friendly. You know, you're basically working. It's almost like a page builder. When you're creating the forms, you could have multiple forms. You can export them, import them. So you have a couple of default forms that you built, and you want to, you know, when you're a web developer and you want to implement this on several projects, you could easily just import a pre-built form. You can have 10, 15 pre-built forms for different types of businesses and import them in. They're already customized. You just change the contact information, use the same CSS that you used before for mobile, and you're able to streamline the process. And that's what I typically like to do.
And I know the struggle's real because, especially in mobile design, of course, like you said, the Divi customizer breaks down or the builder breaks down into, you know, your desktop, your tablet, and your mobile view. But the mobile view it even provides you is, in my opinion, not really a true mobile view. And of course, that's why I usually got my cell phone out, checking it as I go along, how it's looking. Is there a way to change the size of the way that renders as far as its width to maybe get down to, say, maybe even an iPhone 4, because that's as far back as what I'm willing to go when I start building out sites, just because I feel like by now people have bought technology that's well in advance of that and bigger screens.
Yeah. So you're talking about just the contact form itself?
Well, no, I was getting back as far as into the customizer when you're actually looking at things from a mobile view in Divi. When you click on the mobile view of it, that, in my opinion, doesn't seem to be as narrow as what most mobile phones are. So I think it kind of may give a kind of a false reading, if you will, because when I've condensed some font sizes and then looked at them on smaller phones, and when I got, of course, I got an S7 Edge. So, but if I look at it on an iPhone 4, it'd be like, oh, that's a little too big.
Yeah, the customizer, and it's actually just trying to utilize and do any design on a mobile device is challenging for me.
Yeah,
I typically need the big screens to make all my changes and adjustments, and then I have then I'm able to test on the different devices right here on my other monitor. So, but yeah, I typically, if I have to make changes on the go, the smallest I can use is a tablet. I don't even. Now, I might log in and update a blog post, respond to a blog post, change
sure.
it here. I know there's a plugin by the folks over at New, N-O-O-U, which allows for a mobile-friendly page builder page. So it does make editing Divi pages a lot easier. It reformats and changes things. And it would be nice if there was something out there that did that for the customizer as well. But as far as I know, there isn't anything, and it is challenging to update on a mobile device.
Yeah, and I know there's ways out there to get different size phone views, if you will, to get a site to render in it while it's in development stages. I know there are ways that you can do that. I was just looking at finding ways to make it simpler for the general Divi user when they went into that mobile view. So, because here again, with it not pulling down as close as what I think it should to represent a true phone size, and then people go looking at their sites and like, well, I don't understand. It looked good in that as far as what Divi showed me, but it doesn't render the same way on my phone. I said, well, you got to understand that's a close representation, not an exact, unless you got your phone out and viewing it, just refreshing a page on whatever device you're looking at on, you're really not going to have a good idea of what it's looking like.
No, and even a lot of those sites with that render for even dev tools, if you're using Chrome, they have an emulator built into the dev tools, but even that is not 100%. Every device can be different in how it displays, especially Apple, so it's always good, even if you don't have a device, to use a couple of different tools, rendering tools, but also have a friend or a Facebook group that you can say, hey, can you guys test it out? Because I tell you what, if you join one of those Divi Facebook groups and you post a site that you think is about 99% done, 9 times out of 10, they'll show you that there's a lot of different devices that are showing funky things that you would have never even caught on your own.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of like my own, because I threw my site up in one of the Divi groups. They asked for illustration of websites built using Divi. So I threw our agency website up there, and a young lady threw me a snapshot back, and it was one of my blurb icons that I had put a box shadow on the icon itself, and it looked like it was 3 times underneath of it. I'm like, well, what browser did you use? What kind of phone you on? She said, well, I'm in Chrome. So I pulled up my Chrome browser on my S7 Edge. It's like, I don't see it. What kind of phone you use? And she's like, I think it was a Nexus. I'm like, well, might be a phone issue. I don't know. But my Google Chrome on my S7 Edge, it doesn't show this problem. So I don't even know how to address it. But that's kind of one of the things you got to anticipate, realizing there's probably, who knows, 100 different phone manufacturers nowadays in a variety of sizes. So you're not going to hit the mark on all of them. And if you do, I want you to send me your secrets. I need to know.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We spend a good amount of time mobile testing at the end of each project using emulators, and still nothing helps like having several other people take a look as well. That's why we like to do soft launches and try to get as much feedback in the first week or two of a product being out there before we have the customer, do a loud launch and email blast and everything about the site being live.
And I do want to give this quick little shout out for anybody that's going to listen to me later on throughout the week that's kind of hit me up in any of the Divi groups. If you haven't been to Geno's personal blog site, Quiroz.com, or excuse me, Quiroz.co, I'm going to get that right. For those that are looking for some really amazing tutorials on some of the biggest challenges that I see addressed time in, the questions are asked. I believe between that one and there's one other place that offers some really cool fixes and how-tos, if you will, that are just amazing. So if you haven't made the time to go visit, do so. Go visit Quiroz.co. That's Quiroz.co. Man's got some amazing tutorials on there and some cool little CSS tricks along the way to help you do some amazing things. And if you're not familiar with Geno at all, I encourage you to find his child themes, look them up. If you need a way to display your staff members, he just released that plugin. You better get it before the price goes up.
Thanks, buddy.
That's probably one of the most awesome. In fact, I've referred that out to a couple people. I don't know if he actually got it or not. He was kind of in the middle of a project there, and he's like, "Man, I need a way to display staff members." First thing popped in my head, it's Geno.
I saw that.
Go get it. It's just. So I don't know if he wound up getting it or not, or if he figured it out. But I was like, yeah, that's like most awesome thing, because it's always been a challenge. And now, why I'm talking about your plugin. Have you thought about forking it out to the general WordPress community beyond just Divi?
Yeah, what I'm hoping to do is I have a number of features that I plan on adding to this plugin. Several features. We're going to add a couple more modules. I want to add a filterable kind of like the filterable portfolio, where you could have different departments, and you can click on pastors. And it'll bring up all the pastors. You can bring up admin. It'll bring up all the admin. You could do assistant pastors. It'll bring up all the assistant pastors. And a couple of other Divi modules set just for it, adding a bunch of new meta fields. And then what I want to do, once I start to build up the premium plugin, is release a trimmed down version free maybe even get it into the repository and allow people to have a way with it.
Yeah, because I had a gentleman reach out to me when I was really pushing that post hard. Don't know if you've ever heard him or not, but Marcus Couch, him and another gentleman do a very well-known plugin review show weekly for WordPress. And of course, when I push that, he's like, "Is it in the WordPress repository?" I said, "Well, the best of my knowledge," I said, "this is specific for Divi users." Now, will that fork out to Extra as well, or is it strictly to Divi?
Right now, it's strictly Divi, but we're going to be looking into seeing if we can integrate the two. That's the goal. That's the plan. But at this point, it hasn't been tested with Extra.
Gotcha. So right now, but yeah, I just like, man, I hope he puts it out in the whole WordPress community, because that's another issue I see throughout there as well, is how to list staff members. It's always the number one thing I always see get asked is like, does anyone know if there's something out there that exists in a plugin or what have you that will allow you to list your staff members and display them as elegantly as what the plugin you just developed, released, does and performs. So what's next on the plate besides what you just talked about, maybe adding in some additional functionality to that plugin? Anything secret that you're working on behind the scenes there that's going to take people by surprise?
No big secrets, really, at this point. We have a couple of ideas out there that we're toying around with. But I think 2017 for us is going to be more of a slow and steady sort of year. 2016 was a really big year. We brought out a lot of child themes. We're going to continue to do child themes. We want to continue to take that to the next level. And we want to continue to build out options that aren't available in Divi and make them available in the customizer and with additional modules. So that's something we're looking into. So that's something you can expect to see from us. The plugins are more or less going to come about as we see a need for something in particular. We do have a lot of tutorials, and we can easily take some of those or a handful of those or a whole bunch of those and turn those into a plugin. We can take our most viewed and commented on, our most popular blog post, and convert those. And that's something we've talked about, me and Jerry. But at this point, there's nothing big and secret on the horizon. Really, what we're going to look at is seeing where things are going with the community in general, with AMP, with WordPress, and the visual builder, and just continue on a slow and steady path this year of taking care of our customers who put up with us this year when we had to give up some of their time to building products and a marketplace in a new market in general. So this year we're kind of going to focus back on taking care of our solid customers and doing probably building up our white label list again and getting some of those new bigger clients secure.
So you brought up a really good point there, because I think a lot of people, when you get locked into communities like Divi, and kudos to anybody that does, because it is probably one of the best communities I've been in with the most support. People are amazing in there. But focusing on the fact that this is powered by WordPress. Since WordPress 4.7 came out with the last release, one of their big focus points was on the ability to put the CSS Live Customizer out on the front side. Do you think that that's going to cause the folks at Elegant Themes maybe to pull back on what they do in development with the CSS aspect on a global end of it, as far as in the theme settings, and maybe just focus more on the modules? Or how do you see that maybe panning out, and where's that going?
Well, I don't think they're going to scale back, or Elegant Themes is going to scale back or change direction in how they've laid out the options to use and add CSS. In fact, I think the way they've done it, by allowing us the opportunity to assign classes to almost anything very easily, is a very powerful function and feature. And so it's smart to leave those options in there. I think that's what allows me to get in there and make some really cool customizations, is by being able to give it anything my own class. And I like the fact that they have it in theme options. Now, we get to a point where it's in the customizer as well. That's great. It'd be a user's preference. I don't know which is going to be the higher level in the hierarchy. I don't know if theme options will override customizer or customizer will override theme options, but I like the theme options CSS because when a customer buys a child theme with a lot of modified CSS, a custom CSS, if they're going to change anything, I recommend doing it in the theme options CSS, which overrides my style sheet. And that way, if there's ever an update or something goes wrong, they don't lose any of their customization as well.
Yeah, so one thing I've tried to focus on, I don't think a lot of people realize that, you go out and you buy just a theme or a framework, what have you, and you just leave it naked without buying a child theme or creating a child theme. So you put all these customizations in there, you do a lot of CSS work, what have you. Then another big update comes out. Next thing you know, everything you just done is wiped out.
Yeah.
And, if you didn't save that down to a file somewhere, you're having to put them back in. And you're like, oh, I got to go do this all again. So it's always a good thing, just like Geno said, get a good child theme. So if you're going to make those modifications, you do so in the child theme. So in the next big rollout of the main theme framework itself, as far as Divi as a platform, you don't lose all that work. You're not losing any time.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Geno, man, I appreciate you hooking up with us today. I know you said you were cut loose. I'm going to let you get out of here and get back to work. But where can people find you at? What's the best place for them to locate you and seek out all the amazing things you got going on?
Yeah, well, you can, my main website, our web design website is montereypremier.com, where we also run a Divi marketplace and show off all our services and custom projects and our new engaging work-life blog. You can also find me on Quiroz.co, Quiroz. That's my personal website where we do a number of Divi resources, tutorials, and you can always catch me on Twitter and Facebook at GENOQ.
Awesome. Geno, I appreciate you taking time out to join up with us today. Hope that Christmas for you and your family was amazing and blessed, and certainly hope that 2017 for everybody, whether you're a developer, an agency, and individual, whoever. I just hope that this year is really going to bring a lot of blessings to people here in America and around the world. It's been a lot of suffering, and I think everybody is ready for a new breath of fresh air. It's ready for some true life-changing events. But nonetheless, appreciate you hooking up with us again today, Geno. It's great talking to you. Have a great day, sir.
Hey, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. I really enjoy it. Thank you for having me, and Merry Christmas. I hope your Christmas was merry and that you're going to have a great new year, and God bless.
All right. You as well, sir. Appreciate it.
All right.
Bye-bye.